My name is Benjamin Lewis. I am the director and producer of Stoker Hills, and you are listening to The Graveyard Show.
Welcome to the Graveyard.
And welcome to another edition of the Graveyard Show podcast. I am your caretaker, and the Graveyard is open for 2022. Happy New Year, everybody. It's great to have you back. It's great to be back with you as we begin this new year. And, hopefully this is going to be the year that we thought last year was going to be. I'm hoping that next year I'm not going to be saying the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. I hope you all had a great holiday season. For those of you that are new to the program, welcome to the show. You have a lot to catch up on. And of course, for all of my returning listeners, it's great to have you back here as well. Hopefully you had a chance to listen to my offerings from December. Of course, the first one was Voices from the Grave, which was my year-end show featuring outtakes from interviews that I did in 2021. And then I followed that up with GYS Classic number 6, which was my interview with Paul Sollett, the writer and director of the film Grace. Now, that show I uploaded in its entirety because that is also the same show where I announced that I was going to step away from the Graveyard Show podcast for a while, and I was going to hand over the show to Rich Peterson up in Madison Horror to host and produce in my absence. So hopefully you had a chance to check those out. If not, well, I just gave you a summary of what both shows are. Well, as you're here at the top of the show, I'm going to be joined by Mr. Benjamin Lewis. He's going to be my first guest of the new year. He is the director as well as the editor and one of the producers of the new film Stoker Hills, which is going to be released in theaters and on demand starting January 14th. The film stars Tony Todd, John Beasley, Danny Nucci, William Lee Scott, as well as Stephanie Brass, David Gridley, and Vince Hill Bedford, Tyler Clark. And as I said, the movie's going to be released on demand and in theaters starting January 14th. And we're going to get to that in we're going to get to it right now. My team has been well rested, so they're ready to get to work and start the new year off right. On the other side of this interview, I'll give you some updated information regarding the next Graveyard Show Classic, as well as some other information regarding the Graveyard Show podcast. That'll be on the other side of this interview. But, of course, well, as you can hear in the background, a new grave is being added. And when that happens, that means one thing. My guest is here, and it's time for me to get to work. And joining me now is Benjamin Lewis, who is the director, editor, and one of the producers of the film Stoker Hills, which will be available in theaters and on demand starting January 14th. And it is a real pleasure welcoming Ben to the Graveyard. Ben, thank you for joining me on the show.
Thank you for having me. Looking forward to talking to you.
Well, it's great having you here. Let's just get right into it. We'll start off with the most basic question. What can you tell us about the film?
Well, what I can tell you is this is like most people will hear this is like a found footage movie. Well, we made sure this is entirely different in terms of the approach that we took in telling the story. And it's not your conventional found footage, but yet we do respect the format. So I'm pretty positive when you watch this film, you will be entertained.
And is there anything as far as the plot goes that you can tell us about, or is it something that you'd rather audiences kind of wait and see once they fire up the film, or if they go to the theaters to see it?
I think once they watch the film, we're coming out in 2 days. They'll be able to tell. But there's a lot online right now. If you follow at Stoker Hills, you will get a lot about the plot, but it's pretty straightforward. It's basically a movie about a few missing kids, college students, that a couple of detectives are using as their main subject is the found footage. So that's sort of like how we went about telling the story. So, but besides that, you can watch from the trailer to what we have on the social media. You should be able to get a lot more than I can tell in a few seconds.
Sure. So how did you get involved with the film?
Well, it was pretty interesting. I knew the screenwriter for a while. We used to we still do play basketball. And Jonah sent me the screenplay. He sent me actually two screenplays, and that was one of them. And the other one was a romantic comedy.
Talk about two different types of movies.
I know. Although nothing against romantic comedy, but when I read that, I was like, wow, that is my kind of stuff. Because prior to that, I had done a found footage movie again, which was, a while back. So anyway, when he sent me the screenplay, I read it. I really liked what I liked about the film was how pure the younger characters were, in contrast to the detectives, you see, because a lot of times I think people feel like all the characters have to somehow merge. So if you have like a serious film, every character has to be toned down somehow. He didn't do that. He didn't pull any punches. So he wrote the young college guys the way, they would be filming themselves, not thinking anybody would ever find, the footage. And then the detectives are, your typical film noir, a detective story who are trying to solve, and they have a limited time to find a story. So I really liked that about the screenplay, and I met with him. We worked on the screenplay a little bit more, and from that point on, I told him, look, this is going to take me a little while to do because I really want to develop this right. He was on board, and that's basically how we went about making it.
It's funny you should say that because I did notice that watching the movie. It was one of those things where I'm watching the film and you kind of wait for the cliches, and the interaction between the different characters is really it's very genuine, and it seems very real, especially with our younger cast in the film. But actually, I want to start off with asking you about the other actors that you have brought in that are veterans in film and TV. You brought in Tony Todd, John Beasley, Danny Nucci, William Lee Scott. So what's it like having that kind of talent and experience on set?
Oh, it was wonderful. It was really, really comforting knowing, okay, you've seen their work. Like John Beasley, I had seen his work, and the one of the producers, Timothy Christian from Night Fox, who funded the film, said, "Hey Ben, for this particular role, I have an actor I want to suggest," and he said John Beasley, and I said, "Send me his reel," and man, I realized I've seen his work. He was like so brilliant. So once you cast him, okay, well, basically that was the work right there. Certainly you work with him as an actor. He had a number of questions and things like that. So that certainly is excellent. And it was the same with William Lee Scott. All right. William Lee Scott was part of the same little basketball clique here. We played. He knew me for a while. I did not realize, to be honest with you, you will not believe this. I did not realize he was an actor. This is LA for you, all right? So I didn't know Jonah was a screenwriter. I did not know Will was an actor. We were just playing basketball. And then so when Jonah said, "I think Will would be great for this," I said, "Who's Will?" So and then he showed me his reel. I was, wait a minute, I know Will. And then we put that aside. Besides his reel and everything, I wanted to make sure. It's one thing playing basketball, but now we got a movie here, Will. So let's meet, and would you mind doing some screen test kind of stuff, And he was cool about it. I said, look, this is how I'm going to know he's serious. If he feels he's above me, me doing like a screen test with him, then he's not the guy. But if he's willing to do a screen test and then send it in to me, and then I give him some adjustments and say, hey, can you do it this way? And I'm like, okay, we're good to go. So I did that. And then certainly Tony Todd was at the top of the list. We say, okay, we would like to, the professor role, what would be great would be for us to get one of those legends. Okay, let's just put some names. We're probably going to get a quick no, but let's start with Tony Todd. That way we get the quick no out of the way, and we'll move on down. And we sent his agent the script, his manager and agent. And they were like, wow, we really like the script, and we're going to give it to Tony. We're going to see what he says. We're like, what? Okay, all right. Looks like there's a chance. And then he agreed. So that was amazing, just having him. The way he works, he's such a pleasant guy to work with. And he's all about the character, questions. And he brought a lot to some of the dialogue that we had. He ran some stuff by me, and I discussed it with Jonah. So it was really excellent, having that kind of like a collaboration.
I was going to say, getting Tony Todd in your movie is not a bad day.
Oh, are you kidding? That was like, are you serious? We're like, even on the day you're waiting to see, is he going to show up? Is this for real?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's pretty awesome. I mean, yeah, he has such a great body of work. You also, on the flip side, you were also able to get a very experienced group of young actors to be in this film as well. Stephanie Brass, who plays Erica, David Gridley, who plays Ryan, Vince Hill Bedford, who plays Jake, Tyler Clark, who plays Danny. How long did it take to find that group of actors to play those parts in this film?
Yeah, that took a while because one thing I like to do with my films is that I like to sort of develop them without pressure, because I know I wanted to have full creative control over how I tell this story, because the way, you see the script is quite different, and typically if you try to do it on a bigger budget, you're going to have a lot of parties who might have different ideas. So anyway, what I wanted to do was find experienced actors that are young and yet committed to the role. So that took me a little while, and Jonah was cool with the fact that it took me a year, actually over a year, to find the actors. And once we first did audition via online, which is funny enough now, I guess that's how you do everything. But when we were doing it, that was before before the pandemic. So we went through a lot. That's the most I've ever seen audition, and that was sort of like the process. And then now it was interesting. Once we got Stephanie, it came down to a lot of different people we saw, and then it came down between Stephanie and somebody else. And then again, it was all about being able to take adjustments and commitment to when you ask them to, would you mind doing it this way? And then also full on like borderline like screen test kind of thing. And then when we were auditioning the guys, now Jonah, funny enough, was on a Netflix show with David Gridley, and he suggested him. And then so we contacted his agent and they sent him. So there was a little scheduling issue because they were working at the same time. But anyway, he came in, really blew us away, and then we had him come back again. And then there was Vince, where we didn't know. We noticed they had the same agent, but turns out they were friends before the film. And then so that really came through. They improvised quite a bit and did some great things. So that was that. And Tyler was the same thing. It took us a while. We went through a number of people, and again, commitment and flexibility, because this is the kind of role where, especially when you're shooting on that kind of budget, you want to know if you make an adjustment and you're ready to go, will this actor be able to, shift on the fly like that? We certainly didn't shoot on the fly, but I like to have actors that can give me more range than what's on the page.
Yeah. Now, I was going to move on to the actual shooting of the film, but there's something that, as you were talking about the cast, I kind of want to jump ahead to the or end of the credits. Actually, we're going to go far now into the movie. There's a very interesting print at the end of the credits. There are thank yous for the blocking rehearsals and the table reads for the film. I've never seen that in a movie credit, as far as I can remember. I'm curious, how much table reads, how much rehearsal went into this? Because the cast did seem like, because it felt like they really had a tight-knit group going on in this film.
Oh, absolutely. There was a lot of rehearsals. And now, even prior to final casting, some of the actors from the table reads are in the movie, and some of them are actors I had worked with prior. Two of them are very close friends of mine. They were in my first experimental movie where I didn't know anything about filmmaking, and these guys were like, they carried me. That was Tom Martin, who was one of the cop called Martin. Actually, I couldn't think of a character name. I was like, Tom, I'm just gonna call your character, Officer Martin. He goes, that's fine, man. And then there is Peterson, who's by Michael Faulkner, who's that sort of like cop who keeps screwing up, waiting for you, if you remember. So he was throughout the entire process of developing, where we did multiple reads, because we would kind of like, we write the script and do some changes and see how it flowed. And that was, again, prior to totally locking everything. So I feel when you do that sort of thing, I feel you need to thank a lot of the people that were involved, the schools that provided the actors, because they figure that's great experience for them to work with a working director, but still that's their time. I make sure there's craft service. You give them as much as you can, but I feel, they were part of the process. You know what I mean? It's not a one, when you do a movie, it sounds like you did everything yourself, but it's not true. And they had input whenever they came in.
Yep.
They had input, and there were some of the lines made it in. Some of the things they said because I like to rehearse, and I say, okay, let's kind of like ad lib using the same lines, staying within the same concept of what the point of the scene is, but let's ad lib. And they came up with some interesting stuff that made it in. So, so I think
yeah, you could definitely tell. You could definitely tell that there was work that was done prior to this, because it shows. And I'm sure too, as an independent film, you don't have time to waste, or more importantly, money to waste. On having to redo and try, and you can't do it first time on set, especially like the abduction sequence, which is done so well. I wanted to get into the trappings of first person narrative. There are so many movies, especially nowadays because of technology, you can do first person horror so much easily than prior. What I liked about your movie is that with the first person portion, there we go, easy for me to say, of the movie.
Very hard, man. You pulled it off.
I had to really concentrate on that one.
I like it.
Take two. You see, what I really enjoyed about it was that the trappings of first person movies are, because it's the viewer's only vantage point, you have to show everything, even if you have to break the realms of reality. And that's what I find the difference between good ones and bad ones. And with yours, what I liked is that you weren't afraid to have the camera down, pointing at nothing, having stuff happen off camera that you hear audio-wise, but you don't see it. And I'm curious, what kind of decisions were made by you and your DP when you're putting these together, because I'm sure there's a part of you that says, well, we don't want to not show too much, and then there again, you don't want to get careless. So how did you decide what was going to be seen and what wasn't going to be seen?
Well, one of the reasons why Jonah said he sent me this particular script is because after I told him I was a filmmaker, after we'd known each other for so many years. But anyway, he was like, he went and looked and he saw a film called State's Evidence, right? Which is basically kind of like the Columbine, story. So, and that particular film was again, a found footage. And it was interesting because when the screenwriter sent me that other script, it was he made it where everything had to be from the vantage point of the camera. And then, and I told him, well, I see what you're doing, but for me, I want to, because so many people do it, and I think it's really interesting to step out. Not like this particular film. This is like different in the way I did Stoker Hills. However, State's Evidence gave me, a good amount of training to realize, okay, this worked. And I did some camera tests to convince him, because Mark had done a lot of stuff. He had some big studio films, #1 stuff at the box office. So he gave me the script to do. So he had, he wanted to see how I saw it differently. So I did some tests and realized, okay, we can step out. So this particular film, I said, I'll use some of my experience from State's Evidence. However, there are some pivotal moments that I had to, hold my ground and go, we're not going to show that. Everybody said, wow, how can you not show this? This is so pivotal. The audience would like to see it. Again, to me, it's a slippery slope, because how can you do something different if you are following the same footsteps of, you gotta do this, you gotta do that. You're gonna have to break the rules sometimes. And to me, I was like, okay, if this pivotal moment happened and the person loses control, if you know what I'm talking about, of the camera, to have the camera fall and point perfectly to me, that's gonna be cliche. I'm not shooting it. And it's interesting, like you say, it's a low budget. You don't have the budget to go back and go, oh, I made a mistake. This is not working. Let me go reshoot. So I knew in my head it was going to work. So we did that. And then DP was like, you saw his work. He's really amazing. He understood some of the stuff. And when we had those kind of calls, he would go with what I ultimately say, and certain things he would fight for and tell me. I think the camera should be this way. But he did a lot of great work when the guys were like sort of like putting the camera down.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, I really like this. This is what it's seeing, you know.
How many times, like, because obviously you're having your camera team shooting it, but how many times were the actors actually using the camera?
They use the camera about probably 5% of the time.
Okay.
5%, because they interestingly, their filmmakers, especially David Gridley, he's a shooter. He shoots stuff for, like, if you go on his channel on Instagram, he shoots a lot of really cool stuff. So, but that's besides the point. I don't care how much experience you have. You're not holding my camera. This is not what happens. Was I felt like, you know what? There's a youthfulness in the way you let the guy kind of like play with the camera, because it was, you just show him how to do. Plus, we would watch the takes anyway. We showed him how to do the zoom. This is what we're going for, and he got it. And you let them shoot. And after that, a lot of times I was right there, you know, with the DP, and we mixed it up. And that's one thing. I think when you mix it up, it gives a better sense of something that's genuine.
And you don't have a feeling like, oh, here's where the actor's holding it, here's where the DP's holding it, because I remember the one scene where they're pointing early in the movie, where they're pointing the camera at the mirror, so you're seeing the actor with the camera, so it gives you that feeling. Oh, okay, maybe they are shooting this thing. And scenes in a car, there were moments where I was like, oh, maybe they let the actors do this.
I did.
Yeah.
I did that. And it was cool because they're really good. And you know what? There's some behind the scene footage. I hope some of the BTS will eventually make it out. Mm-hmm. And these guys were like so cool. I didn't see this until recently, where Tyler, who was doing our behind the scenes, was filming something, again, being low budget. He was multitasking as a location person. So they called him and they told him, hey, leave the camera here, man. So and they continued the interview doing some, you know, they were filming just fine, you know. So we did let them film.
Now I know we're kind of running short on time here, so I'm going to kind of jump ahead. The film definitely has a film noir feeling to it, and I'm wondering if that was something that was planned for the movie, or if that was something that just organically happened.
No, it was planned. Day one, when I went to meet with Jonah to know, okay, if I'm going to do this script, let's have a meeting at Starbucks. And I told them there were a couple of movies that I see that if I had to pick those two, you know, and one of them was a very, you know, typical film noir. And I really love that look for the film. I think it works well in terms of contrast with what we're seeing.
Yeah.
So that was by design. You know, whether somebody like it or not, I went for that. From day one, I knew that's what I wanted. It was so clear in my head that it had to be this way, you know.
Yeah.
Borderline cliche detective is how I wanted it to be. You know what I mean?
Sure.
But still work.
It does work.
You know.
It really does, because I'm watching it and I kind of had a feeling like it has a little bit of Seven, it has a little bit of 40s noir. I'm watching it, I'm like, yeah, this is really interesting, because it's not.
You got it.
It's not something. Yeah, you don't really don't really see that very much anymore. I think it's now called neo noir.
Just so you know, that was exactly the movie that I told Jonah in the first meeting. In my mind, I want to know if we're going to be on the same page. I was like, I see Seven.
Yeah.
And I see, you know, I gave him another thing in terms of like the gory parts and stuff like that. So I was like, I want to be, and he's like, yeah, I definitely see that. And then so, you know, it's interesting that you said that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's there.
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, I definitely see that. It's, it really works. But of course, now when you talk film noir, you talk about working nights, you talk about, you know, and all kinds of stuff. So how can you discuss what it's like working at nights for those out there that have never had the joy of doing that?
extremely difficult, and you know, it's something that, again, I'm happy we did it. Now I will allow double or triple the amount of time to shoot something at night, and then. Look, it never snows in LA. This is Los Angeles. I mean, it snows, but up in the mountains. And then, so we had to shoot in Angeles Forest. We had our shoot set. We just started shooting. And we're like, okay, next couple of days, we're going to be in Angeles Forest and do all the forest stuff. And then we got snowed in. You couldn't go up there. They closed the road. And then there was like this endless rain. It rarely ever rains here in California. Sometimes it rains. Man, we had to deal with all of that. But what was great was I always wanted the atmosphere to be a very strong element part of the film. And then so we kind of like managed to use a lot of it with the fog, and I had rain anyway, but it's hard to do because it would pour down, and then all of a sudden when you're able to shoot or when you set up, it's not raining as much. It was very difficult. It was cold, but we had very committed actors and crew members that I didn't hear a single complaint. It was quite amazing. Doing that.
I was going to say, I'm sure it wasn't cold in Angeles far as at night after rain.
Let me tell you.
People walking around looking like the Michelin Man.
I know. But you know what you use, what happened is that, you as long as you have committed people, you use the discomfort and say, well, if you're shooting a movie about that, where these detectives are in the woods looking for this killer and looking for these kids, it's not going to be comfortable. So, if we can somehow, when we take little breaks, we like a little family and we stay warm when we can, but we can use that discomfort to focus more and make it happen, So that's what we did. And the actors used it. Some of the lines Stephanie Brass was saying, that was like her own stuff. About like, I'm freaking freezing here, come on, guys. No, it was. Yeah. There was somebody hiding in the bushes to give her coat in between takes.
She with me, I can't imagine. That just, God. Yeah, I'm going back in time now and just, I'm getting cold just thinking about it. Well, you and your team did a heck of a job making this movie. I wanted to quickly ask, and then I'll let you go. If anybody wants to find the movie online in terms of social media or anything, is there anywhere they can go?
Yeah, absolutely. You look at Stoker Hills is our official Instagram, and on Facebook is also Stoker Hills. And the film Stoker Hills is available on, will be in theaters, in selected theaters. So if you go to our website, stokerhills.com, you will see all the different cities where we're playing, including here in LA. We're starting on Friday, the 14th at the Limley in Glendale. And then you can also stream it on iTunes, on Vudu, as well as Amazon this starting Friday.
Great. I wanted to ask about you as a director and editor, but we'll have to save that for another time.
Anytime.
Listen, thank you so much for joining me here on the Graveyard Show podcast. Wish you luck with the film, and would love to have you back on the show again down the road.
Oh, anytime. Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
And as I put this interview to rest, I really want to thank Ben for coming on the program. We put this together very last minute, and I want to thank the folks over at Falco Inc. for doing that. It was really nice of them to do. This is my first time meeting Ben, and it's such a pleasure. Listen, go out and check it out. It is called Stoker Hills, and it's available online and in theaters starting January 14th. And hey, let me know what you think. You can always send me an email at gyspodcast@gmail.com. gyspodcast@gmail.com is how you can get in touch with me and the show. Okay, very quickly, as I begin to close down the graveyard, I just wanted to talk about what's coming up next. So, as I mentioned, in December, I did upload the Outtakes show, Voices from the Grave, as well as GYS Classic number 6. Well, I do have some news regarding the next GYS Classic, and it has to do with a recent Shudder series that was just released a while back. It's called Behind the Monsters, and if you're not familiar with it, it is a multi-episode show where each episode deals with one iconic monster. Michael Myers has one, Candyman, Chucky, Freddy, Jason, Pinhead. And while I was watching the show, there was someone who popped up that was being interviewed. And I was like, hey, that's Brian Collins. Brian Collins is, of course, from Horror Movie A Day, which he started many, many years ago. Brian actually used to be a contributor here on the Graveyard Show podcast. He had a segment that was monthly called BC's Video Vault. And when I saw Brian on the show, I was like, oh, man, it looks great. And it's been a while. So I thought, you know what? Why don't I upload the next GYS Classic when Brian was a guest, because before he was a contributor, he was a guest on the show. So GYS Classics number 7 is going to be Brian Collins from Horror Movie A Day, back in, I think it was 2009. I have to look that up. But I'm going to be uploading that soon, and who knows, maybe I'll go through and find some of his old BC's video vaults, and maybe I'll upload those as well at some point. So GYS Classic 7 is going to be Brian Collins from Horror Movie A Day. Now, if you listen to the Graveyard Show podcast on YouTube, you will have noticed that we've built a new wing here at the Graveyard. It is the George A. Romero wing, and well, on YouTube it is basically a playlist, and it is all things George Romero. So it's my interview with his widow, Suzanne Desrochers Romero, the interviews that I did with Kim Paffenroth many years ago regarding the zombie movies of George Romero, and also the show that I had Judith O'Day on, of course, Barbara from the original Night of the Living Dead. So there is a new wing here in the Graveyard. Is the George A. Romero wing. So if you're a fan of George Romero and you want to hear more about him, well, you can go find the George A. Romero wing on YouTube for the Graveyard Show podcast. Speaking of shows on the YouTube channel for Graveyard Show podcast, Catacombs of Horror, which is exclusive to YouTube. 2 episodes, Best of 80s Horror, and my favorite scenes from Count Yorga Vampire. I have to say, if I had to put money down which would be more popular, I would have said hands down the 80s episode. No, not even close. Count Yorga Vampire is blowing up, and I want to thank everybody out there for watching it and commenting on it and liking it, etc., etc., etc. Certainly did not expect that. It was one of those things where I just kind of threw together, and I was like, I'm just going to roll the dice. And man, people are really loving it. So I want to thank all of you for that. There is a new Catacombs of Horror in development right now. I'm hoping to have it up maybe within the next month or so. These things take a lot of work. I put a lot of thought behind them before doing them, and I unfortunately don't have the kind of time where I could just devote a lot of it to that. So I'm kind of maneuvering the waters on that one. So stay tuned. New Catacombs of Horror will be coming soon, as well as a new GYS Classic number 7 with Brian Collins. In the meantime, as I mentioned, if you would like to reach out to the Graveyard Show podcast, you can do so at gyspodcast@gmail.com. gyspodcast@gmail.com. Graveyard Show Podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, everywhere podcasts exist. And of course, as I just mentioned, you can find The Graveyard Show on YouTube as well. If you know anyone who is a fan of horror, please invite them to enter the Graveyard. New listeners and friends are always welcome. All right, well, listen, it's great opening up the gates for 2022. It's great having you here. Let's make it a great year, both in and out of the Graveyard Show Podcast. All right. Here's to a great 2022. All right, and as you exit the Graveyard, I would like to remind you to please lock the gate behind you. We wouldn't want anyone to get out. Until next time.